We have so much braking tutorials on YouTube, it's absolutely amazing, but this one is gonna be completely different, I'm gonna promise you, because in this braking tutorial we're including the setup, what you need to change to increase your braking skill. I'm showing different values, how you can use trail braking and how you can increase your sensitivity and your skill level as well. This system that I use with setup and braking and trail braking and how you can learn it in different levels, you can apply basically through all the cars in the game. So these values that I'm talking about, you can use them to like manipulate your car behavior and find that sweet spot for you. Before we get into all braking rules, tactics and exercises, first we need to talk about the settings. I have the Simracing P1000 and I'm using the angle braking method. So I'm not using the load cell, which is weird for some, I have to admit, and for me it's a bit weird as well. But over here I can actually dose it really as my liking. I can put, like, when I open this up, I can use the full range of this and I can really dose it. Like if I release the brakes gently, I can actually try to like bring this down very gently, and even like a little bit of braking input, 10%-ish, halfway, I can really feel the difference. This is what I really like. A lot of people say, no, you should use the load cell. Well, if I can use the load cell and I'm like using it like this and I have the full 100% and I start releasing it, I don't really feel this. This is just, it's always dropping down at least immediately that 10%. And the Race Beyond Matter guy, he like made me aware of this issue. So, and in the angle I don't have this issue. I could just like be really, so look at your own settings and see how this is working, and make sure when you're hitting it fully, I have a little bit of a dead zone here, so you can always have that 100%. Sometimes it's 99 or 98. Really check if that is correct. Before we get into the juicy stuff with setups and things we need to change, first we're gonna need to look at some rules for braking. When we use the full 100% of the brake power, we cannot use the steering wheel. So this basically means we're using the tires to slow down the car, and we cannot do direction changes while applying 100% of the braking. So I will show an example what this looks like and how it affects you. As an example, having the steering wheel straight in this graphic and we're having the full 100%, steering we cannot do. But if we have like 90% of brake power, we can maybe get away with a little bit of this steering input. Now if we're like, I don't know, 70%, 70, you can maybe even use a bit more steering input. Let's say we're only like braking for 30%, maybe we can really push it down like this, you know, and even less. So this is something, this is what trail braking basically means. So if we're hitting it straight again, we can go for, so these two should be like connected. You see how that works? So if we're actually using a little bit of steering input while we're under this heavy braking zone, then actually our braking distance gets a bit longer. Look, if we can get like here, now we're not making that corner anymore. See, now I'm gonna show you an example of when I pick the same braking point with like a dead center steering input. So now we're going for that dead center steering input. Look how much, like I could even go later. So that's like the first rule you have for braking, is when you're hitting the brake fully, you should never ever use steering input. So we're using the brake also to steer the car into the corner. And this is gonna be super beneficial. So let's look at this corner right here. We have that straight steering, we're bleeding off the brakes, and you see how this car turns into the corner. This next corner I'm gonna show you as well how the brake is actually, like if I release the throttle only, and now I start braking, you can see how the car is actually gripping into the corner. Over here as well, again, the release throttle, I'm gonna push the brakes, and it's gonna steer into the corner. Over here, I'm gonna show again. Off throttle, but if I start braking, the nose gets grip. And this brings me up to the next point. To find some performance in your braking zone, think about a glass of water you need to empty. And this is like your braking input. You need to pour down this glass dosed to reserve some speed when you're in, like getting into the corner and you need to brake and use like the speed of your car to brake and rotate your car into corner. You actually need to reverse the speed and dose your braking input all the way up to the apex. So we have one smooth brake input, first fully, then bleeding off, and that bleed off will make you steer the car into the corner, rotating it nicely up to its apex before you hit the throttle. Now the best advantage of this is that your car is like set up in a way on the apex so that you can hit throttle earlier than if you didn't trail brake in that fashion. This is an absolute hard skill, and this can always be developed. It doesn't matter how fast you are, this can always improve. I can always improve. I'm not doing this perfectly. So how do we actually practice this trail braking stuff? I made different setups to try out, and I'm gonna show them a little bit first. Level 1 braking. Traction control, ABS, brake bias, that in the middle. Just look at these values, and I'm going to drive like a corner, whatever, just to show you how sensitive this is. Oh, and by the way, guys, this setup is really like, I totally found a solution for this Merc. I'm also gonna make some clip about this, because this Merc, I actually found a way to drive this properly. So I can really like abuse the steering here and be like, use like steering inputs and brake, you know, like I'm braking quite aggressively here. And like this is like very forgiving on braking, and you can learn trail braking with this. But if you find like in this corner you're not finding your rotation with braking, then you could find like a better, higher level setup that I'm gonna show you now. And I'm also gonna explain what can change. So on level 1, we have 60% brake bias, we have the wheel rates, and we have the bump stop ranges. I would say, if you want to play around with this and you want to create more of a challenge, or you want more like contrast in braking and turn in, and how like getting faster braking into corners, you're gonna need to play around with this brake bias, wheel rates on the front, and the bump stop ranges on the front. Now for some cars we can go very low wheel rates on the front, but this car doesn't really like this. So for a level 1, we take these values. Also the ABS, you should have this on your steering wheel. You can obviously drop the ABS when you want to make it more challenging and make it more biting and increase the braking performance. On the level 2, I just decreased the brake bias by a few percent. All of it is still the same. On level 3, I increased the bump stop ranges, which makes the front of the car dive a little bit deeper. So it's making the weight transfer go more to the front, making the nose more dominant. And lower wheel rates also promotes this, because there is less pressure needed to push the front of the car down and creating the grip. On level 4, we have even less brake bias, and we're pushing down the ABS. Now, you can also still, if this is too aggressive, you can also still increase the ABS. And that would be like a brake level 3.5 setup. Now, if we go even further, over here, I dropped down that brake bias even more, and I increased the bump stop ranges even more. And I also took one click off this anti-roll bar. Now, if I'm this low on brake bias, if I'm this high on bump stop ranges for this car, this anti-roll bar is something to consider, because this anti-roll bar will be also on entry. Now, you could ask me, why didn't you start with the anti-roll bar? It's a good question, but this is just how I like to do it. If I can't get it to rotate more with these values, then I go for a click of this anti-roll bar. But this anti-roll bar is also in conjunction with the ride height, and don't get me wrong, we could get more ride height, but that's not the purpose of this video. This is for the braking. Now, and if we go to level 6, over here I actually took off more wheel rates. Now, this makes the AMG Merc pretty sensitive, especially on the fast corners, which is a lot of struggle for a lot of people, including me. So now I'm gonna drive like a show lap of this level 5 braking, and you can compare that to that first clip to see how this car is behaving on all the entries. So this car is just rotating a lot more under braking, but you do need to be more sensible with your inputs, and it's especially on this next fast corner to the right-hander. You can see how this car, whenever I touch the brakes, how much it's rotating into the corner. Now I can actually get like the really fast lap times with this kind of setup. Now I can already hear everybody shouting, so what about all the other cars and not the AMG? Well, I will explain. Let's say I'm just going to pick one here. We're gonna pick this Lamborghini. So we have the Lamborghini Arnaud's preset. I put it on the Patreon store, but it's also in the video Setups Made Easy. This preset, every car, every game, whatever, or every track. And now, this is what you need to do if you just want to focus on the braking. So we have the preset, the values. First up, if you want to squeeze lap time to the max, this one you take off, and you're gonna figure out that rear ride height first. You drive that out lap. Do you feel a balance in the car? Or is it like understeery, we increase the ride height. If it's oversteery, you decrease the ride height a little bit, and that is it. End of story. Then you can change the values like I explained before in the video. You have your bump stop ranges, you have your brake bias, lower the brake bias, and even play around with the wheel rates. Putting them higher will make it more understeery on the braking, putting them lower So for a lot of cars, this wheel rates you don't really need to touch. You can just play around with the bump stop ranges only. And the brake bias and the ABS, of course, you can drop that down. Maybe we look at another example. Let's say you wanted to use the BMW. Again, now it's preset, arrow, dropping down that ride height on the front. Pick a value, drive a few laps to figure this out, having a decent balance, and then go back to this mechanical grip. Play around with the ranges and the brake bias, and when you're not able to get enough rotation, let's say over here like this value, you're still finding yourself very much understeering entry, you can do a click or two on that front anti-roll bar. Now again, you can take this preset from the Setups Made Easy video, but if you want to help me out and you want to save yourself a bunch of time, go to my Patreon store, link down below. Now just to summarize this whole story of this braking, the end goal is that you don't rely on steering so heavy when you're going into these corners. So the higher level up you go, the more ranges you have, the less brake bias you have. You're gonna rely on rotating your car more on the brakes and less with the steering. If you can manage this, and this will actually mean you're using this more of the weight of the car to rotate it into corners, and the people who master this the best will actually be fastest on track as well. It's very hard to do, and I would recommend to try, if you're not using this a whole lot or you're already getting into it but you want to do this more, look at these levels, pick out a track you really know, and see how your braking points actually need to change to reserve up that speed, braking into the corner, hitting that apex. And a special shout out for everyone who's been supporting the channel. If you have a YouTube membership or your Patreon, or you send me tips, shoot me a message on the Discord and I will give you this preset for free.